This is his third year. He came to us from Illinois Wesleyan University. I don't remember the year, but 3 years ago. And he worked as project manager on our National Science Foundation grant. And so he worked his first 2 years on these in-home display studies that we were doing through San Diego Gas and Electric. And I thought somebody from SDG&E might come, but they didn't come. But he partnered with them, and then his thesis project, which you'll hear the results from today, was an extension of that. So we were able to conduct his thesis simultaneously with the in-home display studies that we're doing with San Diego Gas and Electric. So he was able to get the data that he needed from SDG&E and also utilize some of the sample recruitment for his thesis. During his 3 years, he was teaching assistant for the grad stats class. He also was a teaching assistant for my service learning class in environmental psychology, the award-winning now service learning class in environmental psychology. He created a very ambitious thesis, and despite the efforts by his committee to pare it down a little bit, maybe cut a condition or 2 conditions to focus on just one hypothesis, he was insistent that he wanted to go big and he wanted to test several hypotheses in the same thesis, so it's a very ambitious project. Joey recently received the Graduate Dean's Award. So this is for the outstanding graduating master's student here at Cal State. And this, to my knowledge, is the first time that a psych student has won the Graduate Dean's Award. So I don't know, I'll look to the other faculty if you can remember anyone that's won it before, but I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. So to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time. What's that? It'll go. And Joey has a job. So he was talking a little bit about his work on the recycling program, the national recycling program with PepsiCo, Keep America Beautiful. And his job is with a former student of ours, Jennifer Tapanico, who finished some 10 years ago, maybe. And then I worked with Jenny to start a private research firm, and now Jenny leads it, runs it, takes it away, and so Jenny will work with Joey on these field experiments. So he is gainfully employed, and he's been transitioning over as he finished his thesis. So with that introduction, let me turn it over to Joey Schmidt to talk about normative social influence and the moderating role of group identification.
So, like you said, I have a complicated thesis, so here is a little bit of an overview of what we'll cover. Background, hypotheses, standard stuff. Alright, so starting with the background, this project is on electricity consumption, and this is because climate change is a major issue we're facing right now. And according to the EPA, in the past century, global temperatures have been steadily increasing and are also predicted to keep increasing over the next century. And this leads to alterations in weather patterns. Not necessarily everywhere is going to get dry. Here in California, we have a drought going on, but in other places, they're having intense flooding, so things are getting changed all over the place. And a lot of this is being caused by human activity. So particularly energy consumption. Household electricity consumption, it makes up 37% of electricity used in America. And we need to change behaviors to get this down to mitigate the effects of climate change. So to do this, an effective method is using social norms. So I'll cover these more in depth, but these are a couple of the components of social norms, which are beliefs about common and accepted behaviors in specific situations. So if you remember from my proposal, I covered the example of Chicago and the lawn chairs when it snows. And this is actually an Instagram of my friend Erin from this winter. You can see it says polar vortex on it. So it does still happen. But this time, I'll have a different example. So descriptive norms are what most people in a social group do or are perceived to do. Injunctive norms are approval or disapproval of different behaviors by other people in the social group. most effective when they're aligned, so the descriptive matches the injunctive. So I'm going to use an example of hot dogs. In Chicago, everybody likes their hot dogs, and these are a couple of the most popular places. There's actually a Portillo's up in Anaheim, so if you're ever up there, definitely recommend going. And also getting the chocolate cake shake. They take a slice of chocolate cake and throw it in a blender. It's really good. So for the descriptive norm of what a Chicago hot dog is, this is a pretty famous poster. It's in just about every hot dog shop in Chicago. It's showing you what goes on it. This is also a list of all of the items that are on a hot dog. Most of these I'm not a fan of, but this is what the standard is. And as soon as I told my sister I was doing this, she ran out and got a hot dog and she said a picture of it. So this is from this weekend. There's also the injunctive norm of no ketchup on hot dogs. So here it's saying if you want to be a true Chicagoan, not only do you see everywhere that no one has ketchup on their hot dogs, but also you're not allowed to. And these are some of the signs that are posted around the city in various hot dog places. This one, if you order ketchup, you have to ring a bell so that everybody knows that you're ordering it. And this is my sister. My family actually owns the book on never putting ketchup on. It's very not allowed. And some hot dog places don't even carry ketchup even for French fries or anything. So they won't even let you try to put it on hot dog. So social norms are underdetected. Most people, when you ask them why they do something, they don't say, I did it because other people did it. They come up with some sort of other reasoning. And they're powerful motivators, so they've been used in all sorts of different arenas, particularly in the environmental domain, so litter, recycling, energy consumption, water, all sorts of things. So when you have a social norm, you're being compared to someone, and that group of people is called the referent group. So in the example of the Chicago hot dog, you're being compared to other Chicagoans, other true Chicagoans. So you might not actually be from Chicago if you put ketchup on your hot dog. Another important part is identification with the referent group. So social identity theory says that you sort of generate your self-concept based off of the people you associate with, and you have different feelings of closeness to the referent group, and this also moderates. It moderated reported drinking behavior, but it also does other normative things. And importantly, group membership is not critical, so you don't actually have to belong to a certain group to live up to its norms and follow their norms. So if you aspire to be in a group, but you're not necessarily in that group, you'll still follow their norms. So on to the hypotheses. So the first hypothesis is that households will conserve more electricity when receiving normative information about a specific referent group than they would if they received a generic referent group. It's still expected that they would conserve in the generic, just not as much. And the second hypothesis is that people who identify more strongly with the referent group that they were given will conserve more electricity than participants who don't necessarily identify with the group that they've been given. So methods, it's a very complicated one, so I have a lot of pictures and everything. So sample selection, we initially were targeting San Marcos, but we ran out of houses that haven't been used in San Marcos, so we had to branch out and do 1,500 households in Escondido to recruit from as well. According to power analysis for moderated regression, we need approximately 750 households, which is per condition that we had. That's for small to medium effect size. So to recruit households, we used Google Maps, which is over here, and Zillow.com. So you can click on each house individually, and it'll give you basic public information about the house. So lot size, house square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, when it was last sold, for how much, all that stuff. And then we use Google Maps to look for any solar panels on the houses, We were classifying different kinds, so we didn't want to include anybody with photovoltaics because it creates inconsistencies in the data. And also, we did include pool solar heating and hot water solar heating. So we also looked for pools themselves, so we coded in-ground, above-ground, hot tubs, all that stuff for each of the 6,500 houses that we were recruiting from. These are the areas that we were targeting in San Marcos and Escondido. So this is campus here, and then this piece is the Escondido chunk. So we have pretty much all over the city we were recruiting. We sent out a pre-survey postcard to 6,500 households, alerting them that we were going to be sending them a survey. It's for research, and we really appreciate it if they filled it out. So like I said, that went out to 6,500 households. We were recruiting for the National Science Foundation study, the IHD study, and this thesis at the same time, so we had huge samples to pull from, even though we did only the 750 at the end of it. So the survey contained questions on identification, so asking how similar are you to your neighbors, how similar are you to similar households that are 2,000 square feet with a pool, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, no solar panels. And everything that was underlined here was specifically tailored to the household based off of the data that we got from Google Maps and Zillow. And then we also had a comparison group of your very energy efficient households in your neighborhood. And we also collected demographic data along with other questions that were specific to the IHD study, such as internet in your home, because that was more of a technical one. And then it contained a consent where participants had to sign and agree that we can download their data. So we got hourly electricity data for the previous year and the year following the study. So this is the front page of the survey. So the primary ones are here. So these were the generic, the specific, and the efficient reference groups that we were providing to get a measure of identification using these scales. Based off of pilot testing, we did adapt them a little bit from the initial, but they're pretty consistent. And overall, at the end result of the survey, we had alphas of 0.9 for each of the items. And then this is the other side, so the demographics, there were a couple climate change questions up at the top. And then this is the consent that the participants had to sign, allowing us to get the data. And then it was co-branded with SDG&E, so we included their logo on there as well. This was the survey packet that went out to all of the households. They received a cover letter, a business reply envelope, a window cling as a little incentive, and then the survey was printed front back, so it was minimizing paper. And this was a huge undertaking, so these next couple slides are just about my RAs and all of the work that they had to do. So all of the envelopes were hand addressed to all 6,500 households. So it was a big deal and it took a lot of time. So this is Perla, she's back there. You can see she's okay, this is at the beginning. So they pulled a lot of time. We recruited from our entire lab. Everybody was helping. Perla Rock, our family, Anna Kane. We were stamping postcards, sticking labels on the postcards, filling out things, all the consent forms. The cover letters had to be signed with my initials and Dr. Schultz's initials. So it was a huge undertaking. And this is Perla. And we pulled an all-nighter. So we started at 8 a.m. and then we didn't finish until 6:30 the next morning. So it was intense. So we had our little thermometer counting up to 5,000. This was our initial mailing. So we finished at 6:30 in the morning and had to truck all these down to mailing services. And that's what 5,000 surveys looks like in case you're curious. So unfortunately, we didn't get as many participants as we initially were hoping looking for. So we decided to go door to door to all of the houses that we contacted and who didn't respond. So we came up with providing seeds for everybody as another incentive, along with a little note that says growing knowledge and plants, the CSU at 17, and another return envelope along with another copy of the survey. So we went out to over 4,000 houses and just went door to door, and if they weren't home, we dropped it off and left them the little survey packet. So that was pretty much most of summer. But we did reward them with food, so we got a taco, we got donuts, all kinds of stuff, so they weren't too bad off. Alright, so after all of that, and the second mailing, we did the additional 1,500 households. We ended up with about a 18% positive response rate. And first, we did the IHD study because that was more complicated, and then all of the leftover participants were put into this thesis. So we ended up with only 624 participants, which was less than the 750 that we were initially hoping for, but everybody was just tapped out. We visited them, all kinds of stuff. So on average, there were a little over 3 residents in the home. They have been living there for about 12 years. Most of the people in the sample, 76%, reported income over $55,000 per year. We had a pretty even split politically. There was a good spread of household sizes and bedrooms, bathrooms. Most people didn't have a pool, and then overall they used about 19 kilowatts a day. So, like I said, we used the smart meter data as the DV for this study. We got hourly electricity data, which we then aggregated up into daily and weekly. So prior to starting this study, SDG&E was concerned that people wouldn't want to get a door hanger. So we sent out a notification telling people that we're going to be giving them a door hanger. And if they didn't want it, to give us a call. We ended up only getting 4 people calling us and saying they didn't want a door hanger. One of them we had to include in the study because they didn't leave a name, an address, or a coherent phone number, so they probably got one. So we assigned them then to condition. We had 5 conditions: the generic, the specific, efficient, information only, and the control group who didn't receive any contact from us. So this is the generic door hanger. This is the base, and then handwritten in here were all of these items. The norm was here with the smiley face or the happy face, and all the addresses were mail merged onto the door hangers. This is the specific one. This was tailored to each household that received it, so these varied based off of what we had from the survey and from the Zillow information. And this is the efficient one. It's pretty similar. This time it just says your most efficient neighbors. And then this is the information only. So they didn't receive any normative information. They just got a few tips that were on the other 3 door hangers. So for the interventions, we went out to all of the houses. We started, these were Saturdays, we started at 7 a.m. and went to each house and just hung the door hanger on there for 2 separate weeks. We did October 5th and October 12th. So on to the results. So preliminarily, we were looking at any influences of temperature or humidity that would have had an effect. And we ran a regression looking at all of the hourly data that we had for the whole period of time that we had available. And there was a significant regression. However, the betas were very low, so it didn't change too much when we ran the analyses, so we just ran it without correcting for temperature and humidity. Also, to test if there were any differences between the information-only condition and the control condition, we ran a repeated measures ANOVA, and it wasn't significant, so we just ended up combining the control and the information only into a combined control, just to ease up analyses a little bit. And also to baseline differences, and there were no significant differences between the groups at the baseline. There was a bit of a skew in the data. It's just kind of how the electricity data works. Fortunately, we didn't have any great outliers. We had a couple initially that were well over 100. They were using about 150 kilowatts per day, but they had called us and alerted us that they had a medical device, so we ended up dropping them from the study. There were only 2 or 3 of those. So, but overall, the outliers were pretty small. So just a refresher for the first hypothesis, it was households will conserve more electricity when receiving normative information about a specific referent group than the generic referent group. So the primary analyses here, we were running in ANCOVA, and there was a significant baseline effect. There wasn't a significant main effect for condition, and there wasn't any significant interaction effect between the baseline and the intervention. For these analyses, we covariated out the second week of baseline, so 2 weeks prior to our intervention, so that to compare something, the data. This is overall what it looked like. So this is the combined control here. It was decreasing slightly, and the efficient condition went down, the generic condition went down, and the specific condition actually went up, which was contrary to what the hypotheses were. So a little bit more in depth. We did plan comparison, so we did follow-ups. I put the graph up here so you can see it a little bit. For the control, there wasn't a significant change, so that was this one here. The generic one, it wasn't a significant decrease, but there was a little bit of a decrease. The specific, it wasn't significant, but there was a trend toward an increase, so this is a positive there. And the efficient condition, there was a significant decrease in electricity consumption from baseline to the first week after the intervention. So you can see the green one up there going down. So to explore this a little bit, we did some exploratory analyses. This time we dichotomized by high and low users. So to do this, we used whichever happy or sad face they received on their door hangers to denote whether they were above or below. And there wasn't a significant difference between for the high users. There wasn't a significant decrease for the low users, but you can see here that the high users in the specific condition were coming down, and the low users in the specific condition were increasing. So this seems to be where some of that trend comes from. The second hypothesis we have is that people who identify more strongly with the referent group will conserve more electricity than participants who do not identify with their referent group. So preliminarily, we're looking at the overall identification with the referent groups. So which one of the 3 that were provided do people just generally identify more with? And they identified more with the specific comparison more than they did with the generic or the efficient. And there wasn't any identification difference between the generic or the efficient comparisons. And here's a little graph of that. So you can see this was on a 1 to 7 scale, and this is a specific, so it was well above the efficient and the generic. The primary analyses for hypothesis 2, we performed a median split, so we put it into high identified and low identified people. We initially had wanted to do a moderated regression, but we didn't achieve the sample size that we needed to do that, so we moved over to ANOVA and conducted the mixed model ANOVAs from baseline to intervention for the high and low identifiers. And there weren't any significant interactions between time and the intervention, time by the identifications, high and low. And these are the generic, specific, and efficient there. So to pull this apart a little bit, we conducted another mixed model ANOVA, this time adding on the split of high and low users. So we had the baseline into the intervention for the high and low identifiers, and the high and low users. And there was not a significant three-way interaction. There was a significant increase for low users with high identification from the baseline to the intervention, where in the control there wasn't a significant increase or decrease for the low users with high identification. And then here is a graph of that. So you can see here that people who highly identified increased, where people who lowly identified didn't increase. So, discussion. So there were a couple of findings. We didn't find the primary ones that we were initially looking for, but we found that the efficient comparison was the most effective at bringing people down in their electricity consumption. And the specific comparison trended towards an increase in consumption, and as we saw, this was driven by the low users with a high identification with the specific comparison group that they were given. And overall, the participants identified significantly more with the specific comparison than they did with the generic or the efficient comparisons. So some possible explanations for these findings. In the efficient group, most of the people were considered high users because just the nature of the efficient comparison. We took the most efficient 30% of the whole sample in that condition, so there were 120 something. And then of that 30%, only half of them received below the norm. So in total, there were only 17 people who were told that they were doing good. So there were a lot of people in that efficient condition that had a lot of room to move down. Another explanation could be that it was an opt-in design. The way that we were gathering information, we had to actually contact the participants, we had to get them to rate their identification, and we had to get them to sign, allowing us to get their data. And a lot of people were scared by that consent form. We were able to tone it down a little from the initial one that we received, which said, I, the undersigned, under penalties of perjury in the state of California, all sorts of stuff. We pared it down a little bit, but it was still scary. We received a reasonable amount of surveys that were completely filled out and sent back to us. They just weren't signed, so unfortunately we couldn't use them. And the happy face might not have been strong enough to combat the boomerang effect that was in this specific comparison group. So people might have not had as many excuses to kind of get around, oh, I'm not really like those people. So a simple smiley face might not have been enough to say, oh, you're doing good, don't increase your consumption. So that would have been something, like I said, in consent. And there was also a rate increase that went into effect in September. So some people might have been receiving bills related to that increase and might have been kind of surprised by that just around the time that our study was happening. So limitations, like I said, the opt-in, we might not have been able to get a lot of the high users who typically bring a lot of the effects from their coming down in electricity consumption. They might not have wanted to participate knowing that they were high users, so that self-selection could hinder our analyses. We did come in below the recommended sample size, and we were getting an individual measure of identification, so not necessary that everybody in the household kind of collaborated on this survey and filled out that identification piece, but everybody in the household is contributing to the electricity consumption. So. And there was a bit of a time lag due to our trying to recruit more participants. So we started recruitment in around late March, with the surveys going out and everything. And then we recruited over the summer, and then late summer we ran the IHD study, and then following that we ran my thesis. So there was a lot of time in which their identification with their neighbors may have changed. And also we had attrition, so 28 households who had initially signed the consent form and were good to go ended up moving out of their houses over that time period, so we've lost some people due to that. Alright, so thanks to everybody for coming, and especially to Dr. Schultz and the committee, Dr. Schultz for helping me out and sticking with me for 3 years, and Dr. Estrada for always being positive and writing broomsticks on my thesis when she's ending because I wrote witch instead of witch. And Dr. Mahler for being very flexible and just saying, hey, I might be thinking about defending my thesis. I know you haven't even seen it yet, but does this date work for you? And then my RAs who were amazing. I had a small army of RAs coming in and out. We had high school students, other volunteers, international people. I could not have done this without all of their help. And my lab family, Maria is here, Hannah for helping out, and everybody else. And we like to do all of our activities, so that's kind of our things there. And my family and friends for being supportive. And Justin, who couldn't be here, he has an exam right now. And then especially SDG and Felissa, who was from mailing services. She wanted to come, but she had a meeting. And the amount of work that it goes into doing a bulk mail is insane. So she was very helpful throughout this process.
All right, so why don't we start with the committee? So Mika and Heidi, if you guys have specific questions for you.
Yeah, go ahead. So like one of the big issues that we've been talking about is this opt-in that you guys had to do. And we talked about this before, because of that you weren't able to get data from SDG on usage and how the opt-ins might be different from those who didn't opt in.
Right.
Are there other things that you do have access to that you might, I mean, realize obviously previous usage would be the most important, but
Right.
barring that, are there other things that we can maybe look at and maybe include in the course in terms of how the opt-ins differ?
There's a couple things on previous research. Unfortunately, the lab is doing a study on the differences between opt-in and opt-out right now. So every weekend they're going out and physically reading electricity meters, so not going through SDG to download that. I'm not sure that I'm ready for
But you have things like, just from the Google Maps, size of the house.
Yeah.
Weather.
You could look at any demographic differences in people who we targeted and who we didn't. Yeah, just not electricity related.
Yeah, which would be the critical one,
Yeah.
obviously, and realize you can't do that.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some patterns that pop up.
Yeah, we did look at the household size, the income, and we also asked on the political affiliation, number of people in the home, so we have that information.
So maybe you can just look at those, and those have been in case some trends pop up. You know, and especially because one of your concerns is that maybe you didn't get a lot of high usage of those new ones for opting out. And so you'll have things like square footage, and you'll have things like where they have a pool, and maybe that will be some of those users, whether it's the high users or even region.
Yeah, we coded for each of those circles. They all have a different assigned area. So
Maybe some of that will help. That, you know, I don't think it's going to show you much different, but could you all have you tried a tripartite split on the specific group? You did a median split.
Right.
Yeah. And so you've got no significant difference, although trending toward those in the low usage coming up, and those in high usage going down.
Yeah.
Right? But if you try tripartite, maybe in the real high users or
Yeah.
just another little thing. How many of the, when you went out the second time, you either had them fill it out right there in front of you, or you left it for them with the same packet and so forth. Do you know what proportion you actually got in person in that second time?
I don't know specifically, but just anecdotally, it was pretty split. If anything, it was more on the side of we got a lot more in the mail. Just because it was the RAs going out, so a lot of times we went out during the day so people weren't necessarily home, and so they filled it out and then mailed it back. We tried to make it as convenient as possible, but we did get a lot of people filling them out at the door. We tried to go out after school, so at 5 to 7 to kind of get some of the afternoon people as well. But
Any hints from that? What were they telling the RAs about why they didn't turn it in the first time? Was there any?
yeah, a lot of people do not trust SDG&E at all. And we got a lot of people saying, I don't trust SDG&E, I don't want them having my data. But they weren't understanding that they already have it, that they were providing it to us, that they're not getting anything new. So people were sort of confused by that. And talking to people in the field helped kind of ease that fear. But that was one of the significant reasons that people didn't turn it back. We had a list of people who had returned the survey but didn't sign it. So when we went out to the houses again, we knew that and we could address any concerns specifically. Those houses, we didn't leave them at the door again because they would just do the same thing. So we only got those ones converted if we were able to talk to them.
What gives you clues for what to do and not to do?
Yeah, yeah,
That
definitely.
word, that letter, and maybe not put their logo.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, right? Because it's an issue of scale and application. So do you prioritize the science, or do you develop something that's actually usable and implemented through utilities? I don't know. I mean, I can make a case both ways, but certainly having that brand on it affected responses.
Yeah, we had to go through their legal department, which is why it got very intense. So that would be something to try to avoid for next time.
Dr. Scott?
All right, I have a question about, you talk about social groups and reference groups. And how do you see those as similar and are they different from the IT?
So they're pretty similar. I see them as a social group. It's just the people that are sort of around and you just associate with. And a referent group is more specifically, you're being referred to them, you're being told something about them. It's kind of being drawn to your attention to pay attention to these specific people. So when you're with your social group, it's not necessarily at the forefront of your mind that you're with this certain type of people, but in a referent group, they're saying, pay attention to other students like at State or to your neighbors or your most efficient person. So it's not necessarily their social group either. So when we were going door to door, some people said, no, I'm not friends with my neighbor. They're all conservative and I'm really liberal. I'm the only one on the block. So it's not necessarily a social group, but they're associated with them in some sort of way by living near them.
Okay, and so you said when people follow norms, they don't necessarily have to be members in order to follow the group. So do you see that as they're not part of their social group, yet they would follow the norms of the reference group? I was trying to understand that statement that you made.
So they might not necessarily be a member of the referent group, so you can tell them something about, for example, Chicago residents. I'm not technically a Chicago resident anymore, but I would still identify with that. So,
My question is because when looking at it, you measured identity, and that I wasn't sure if you're seeing if they identify with the social group or with the reference group, or you're trying to get both of them. So I think you're trying to go for the reference group. Is that
yeah, the referent group, because I mean, it's not necessarily that they socialize with their neighbors. They're just associated with them just because they live with them.
I was just trying to get it straight, because the outcomes, it wouldn't say the outcomes are meaningful, that the identity didn't actually predict engagement in the norms of that group. Is it because they don't, just because they don't identify with it, maybe that identification is not the predictor for reference groups.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah, it could be.
All right. I also had a question about the, actually, it was the same as Heidi's one, about the opt-in, what was the difference between the two groups? If you're going to do this again, what would you do differently now that you've kind of gone through the whole thing? I would guess the procedure wasn't not
Yeah, I would try not to use the SDG system. definitely more difficult to go to the houses and read the meters, and it's not necessarily as accurate, but it would have helped in our response rate probably, and we could have gotten a broader sample. This could have gotten more people that way. It would be nice if we could figure out a way to do it as an opt-out. If there's a way that you can get identification with the groups without specifically asking people. But
Is that it?
yeah, so those are the big ones.
All right, we'll put it up to other faculty for questions.
What a pleasure to see, just that you completed it. And I'm telling you, I think the Happy Faces work, speaking personally, when SDG sends me it, maybe I'm just uncompetitive, but when I see it, it makes me happy. But I wonder if you did anything, or you're thinking about doing anything with the household composition, because my husband and I actually do talk about the score we get when we get our bill. And then we have 2 kids living at home that it doesn't seem to make such a difference to them. And so I look at when we get those months where the consumption goes up and then we get on them. What role do you think, when you're looking at identifying with that group, you're getting the response of an individual, but you've got a household.
Yeah.
What might you do with that, or what message do you get? Am I doomed until they move out? Have to deal with it anyway.
Yeah, we do have information on when we ask for number of people in the household. We also ask for kids under 18, so we have that we can look at as well. Yeah, it's hard to get a level of identification for a whole household. You think that whoever is filling out the survey will be the most motivated to do it in the household, so anybody else might not have as strong feelings about that.
But those other people could affect electricity use.
Yeah.
And it's not related to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be, yeah. Yeah, if there's one person in the house who's really motivated. I mean, we had a couple people who wrote in on the demographic of the political affiliation. We've had a couple people sort of like Democrat, wife is Republican, so there are issues around getting just the single measure.
Was there differences in the people that responded to the survey versus the people whose houses you had to go to? Did they, I mean, were maybe they not sending it back because they knew they were like high energy users, or, but then you were at their doors and they were like, I have to.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. I know a lot of people just said, oh yeah, I saw it. They didn't do it. Whatever. I didn't even see it. So most people weren't too concerned, but the people who were concerned were vocal about it. So. And we did get a handful of angry letters as well. So, oh, we got a lot. Yeah.
Do you have that coded? Can you look at those? Any differences there might be in terms of those came in wave 1 and those came in wave 2?
I don't know if we ended up coding it. We have it on the individual surveys, but that's just the paper version.
Didn't we,
Yeah, sort through all of them.
didn't we do angry disposition?
We have that, but for people who just mailed it back versus who we dropped it off.
Sure.
The initial mailing, we didn't include their address on the bottom, so we know who sent it off the initial mailing. The second round, we printed it off so the RAs knew which house to go to, so by having that on the physical surveys, we know, but didn't put it into the data. Yeah.
I don't know if I missed this in the introduction, but is this the first or one of the few studies in this area?
A lot of the studies looking at the moderating role of identification are correlational. So they found some correlations with people who highly identify it was in drinking behavior, that they could change their reported and planned drinking behaviors based off of the different groups. So it students or other students on this campus, other people in your age group, and fraternity membership, but it was correlational, we didn't actually measure.
And not energy type studies?
Not really for the identification piece. The energy consumption has been looked at with social norms a lot, but this is one of the first experiments tailoring it.
Is there any evidence that an individual identity will predict behavior?
I didn't
Since that's,
see
this is
anything.
like that individual
Yeah.
in the group, the household behavior.
Yeah. Let's see. Offhand.
All right, open it up for general questions. All right, well, thank you very much, Joey. So at this point, we ask the candidates and other students to step outside.